A massive asteroid is rapidly heading toward a spaceship not far away, but the crew members, still in hibernation, have no idea the danger is approaching. With a deafening roar, the asteroid makes a direct impact with the ship, triggering the safety system to issue a danger alert and initiate emergency procedures, followed by the activation of the personal survival systems. Andy, forcefully awakened, had no idea what was happening. He was immediately forced into an AI-powered spacesuit, and before he could comprehend anything, the sleep pod transformed into an escape pod and was ejected into space in an instant. It's only then that Andy, in terror, realizes that their mining ship has exploded, and all 200 crew members have been ejected into outer space. However, most of the escape pods explode as soon as they detach from the ship, and only a few are hurtling toward an entirely unknown planet at a speed of 24,000 kilometers per hour. At such speed, when they enter the planet's atmosphere, the temperature outside the escape pod instantly rises to 1,600 degrees Celsius, far exceeding the safety limits it was designed for. Several pods explode under the intense heat. Andy is extremely lucky. His escape capsule successfully passed through the atmosphere, but before he could catch his breath, the artificial intelligence issued a collision alarm. Once the pod stabilizes, it's about to crash into the surface. Andy narrowly escapes once more, but as he looks at the barren planet, he quickly tries to call out to his companions, only to receive no response. Suddenly, the escape pod shakes, and the AI, Leonard, reports that the terrain is unstable and advises Andy to leave the pod immediately. But when Andy pulls the lever, he finds the hatch is malfunctioning and won't open. Even worse, the emergency window breaker is missing. After failing to kick open the window with his feet, Andy grabs a nearby tool and smashes it into the glass where a crack already exists. Although the process went smoothly, as Andy climbed out of the escape pod, it rolled again, causing a shard of broken glass from the door to slice through his spacesuit. With oxygen leaking rapidly, Andy hastily pulls out liquid glue to patch up his spacesuit, because Leonard detected that the oxygen levels on this unknown planet were extremely low, insufficient to sustain human life. By the time Andy finishes the patch, he realizes that there's only 42% oxygen left, and the escape pod has short-circuited, releasing thick smoke. Andy quickly climbs out. At that moment, Leonard detects the spaceship's wreckage, but it's also burning up and crashing toward the planet. The ship then crashes into the surface right before Andy's despairing eyes. The shockwave from the impact knocks Andy over, but he remains unharmed. To understand his situation, Andy asks Leonard for the flight path of the ship. It turns out that after leaving Earth, they traveled a total of 24.8 trillion kilometers before the ship encountered an accident, and Andy crash-landed on this unknown planet. As Andy is the first human to arrive on this planet, Leonard kindly suggests that he can name it, but at that moment, Andy has no interest in naming anything.
Searching. The name Leonard is available. Would you like to use it?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Request confirmed.
Feeling utterly helpless, Andy shuts off the AI. All he wants is to leave this planet as soon as possible. So, he continues calling for his companions as he walks toward the crash site of the ship. Soon after, he discovers an escape pod but finds no trace of his companions. Initially, Andy plans to take the oxygen pack from the pod, but suddenly a corpse falls out, scaring him half to death. His companion has tragically died, and the oxygen pack is damaged. In frustration, Andy throws the oxygen pack to the ground. Just then, Andy looked up and saw several lights ahead. Guessing they must be his surviving companions, he quickly asked Leonard to map out the shortest route. Andy immediately set off according to the route. However, he didn't notice the large, deep claw marks on the escape pod, which seemed to be from some kind of terrifying creature. Fortunately, everything went smoothly along the way, and Andy successfully reached his destination. He saw a fellow survivor, who was installing some kind of equipment. Upon seeing Andy, the man was overjoyed. He hadn't expected to encounter any other living person. Through conversation, Andy learned the man's name was Dwayne, and he was the ship's communications officer. Dwayne told Andy that the disaster could have been avoided. The company, trying to save costs, had chosen a shortcut through an asteroid belt, which led to the asteroid collision with the ship. Dwayne was now installing a communication device to send a distress signal to Earth. In 8 months, headquarters would receive their distress signal and send the fastest company spacecraft to rescue them. If all went well, a rescue ship would reach the planet in 2.5 years. Upon hearing this, Andy felt hopeless. He didn't think they could last that long, but Dwayne reassured him, saying that parts of the fallen ship were still intact, with enough oxygen and food to last until the rescue ship arrived. Seeing that Dwayne wasn't panicked, Andy began to relax and helped him finish installing the communication equipment. However, in the next moment, a massive figure appeared and dragged away Dwayne, who was behind Andy. When Andy turned around, he found that Dwayne had vanished without a trace. Confused, Andy searched for Dwayne but found nothing. He began to think Dwayne had abandoned him and fled alone. When he found that the communication equipment was already working normally, he immediately sent a distress signal. At this point, Andy's oxygen supply was down to 36%. He needed to quickly make his way to the wreckage of the ship to find a backup oxygen tank, or he would suffocate in a few hours. Andy grabbed Dwayne's signal gun and set off toward the crash site. However, as he followed the route planned by Leonard, he realized that there was a bottomless cliff ahead of him. Andy stamped his feet in anger. Just as he was feeling desperate, a woman's cry for help suddenly came through his communicator. The woman introduced herself as Naomi. She explained that during her escape pod's fall, her leg had been pinned, and she couldn't free herself. She urgently needed Andy's help. Andy immediately opened a holographic map to plan a rescue route, but he found that Naomi was too far away. He wouldn't be able to reach her before his oxygen ran out. In contrast, the wreckage of the ship was closer, and he had enough time to replenish his oxygen there. Hearing about Andy's dilemma, Naomi quickly reassured him that she had plenty of oxygen, enough for both of them. They could get together first, and then head to the crash site. Besides, they didn't know the situation on the ship yet. After hesitating for a moment, Andy realized Naomi was right, and he ultimately agreed to go rescue her first. While Andy rushed to rescue Naomi, they began to get to know each other, talking about their pasts. It turned out Andy was just an ordinary mining worker, while Naomi was a drilling supervisor. Before they knew it, nightfall arrived, but as Andy continued walking, he suddenly stopped. On the ground, he spotted strange footprints leading to a dark hole covered in spider webs. Terrified, he quickened his pace. Andy shared his findings with Naomi, expressing his suspicion that there might be some kind of large predator on this planet. Naomi, upon hearing this, began to panic as well. Just then, Andy heard an eerie low growl, but everything around him was pitch black, and he couldn't see anything. At the same time, Leonard issued a danger warning. The temperature had suddenly dropped ahead, and it was recommended to change the route. Andy ignored this and continued to pluck up his courage and walk forward. Unexpectedly, a huge figure suddenly flashed past in front of his eyes. So scared that Andy quickly turned off the lights and crouched in place, not daring to make a sound. Naomi soon sensed something was wrong. She detected several crew members' tracking signals moving towards Andy's location, but their speed was unusually fast. They didn't seem to be survivors. Andy quickly activated the scanner, and sure enough, he found 3 tracking signals up ahead, but due to the dim lighting, he couldn't make out what was ahead. Andy pulled out his flare gun, ready to fire. To his shock, the flare gun malfunctioned. Panicking, he grabbed a nearby rock to defend himself. Just then, a flare shot through the night sky, illuminating the terrifying creature lurking in the darkness. Andy was horrified. Without hesitation, he turned and bolted in the opposite direction. It became clear that the tracking signals he had detected earlier were the crew members who had been eaten by the creature. As another flare shot into the sky, the creature caught up with Andy. Luckily, there was an ice cave below, and Andy fell into it, narrowly avoiding a fatal strike. But as he struggled to get up, the creature launched another fierce attack on him. The creature, however, was too large to enter the cave, so Andy could only run desperately forward, while the beast continued to pursue relentlessly above, occasionally using its tail spikes to strike. In his panic, Andy didn't notice the sheer cliff ahead. By the time he realized, it was too late. He fell straight down. Though his spacesuit saved his life, the pain in his body was unbearable. Struggling to rise from the ground, Andy hurriedly told Naomi about the close call. Naomi, terrified, urged him to hurry and come save her. They could figure out how to fight the creature together once they reunited. Just then, a distress call from Dwayne came through the communicator. Dwayne, who had been captured by the monster during the day, was actually still alive. The flare from earlier was launched by Dwayne, but now Dwayne is being surrounded by the creature, so he calls for Andy's help. Faced with Dwayne's plea, Andy hesitated. He didn't want to return to that terrifying place, but Naomi convinced him, saying they were the last 3 survivors of the disaster. The more of them there were, the greater their chances of survival. Reluctantly, Andy decided to press on. When he reached Dwayne's location, he found several wrecked escape pods. Andy ran toward Dwayne at full speed, but just then, a creature suddenly appeared and tackled Dwayne. Terrified, Andy quickly hid, turning off his lights. When he looked back, Dwayne was already torn apart by the creature. To make things worse, there wasn't just one creature, another was feasting on a corpse. Andy, horrified, hid behind an escape pod, trying not to make a sound. To his surprise, both creatures began slowly closing in on him. In a moment of crisis, the escape pod in the distance suddenly began to flash, drawing both creatures toward it. It turned out that Naomi had contacted the bodies in the other escape pods, helping Andy escape the danger. Andy took the opportunity to hide in another escape pod, but the danger didn't end there. When Naomi learned Andy hadn't managed to escape, she immediately contacted the next nearby corpse. Unfortunately, the body she reached was in Andy's escape pod, inadvertently revealing his location. As a creature moved toward Andy's pod, Naomi quickly sent out a communication request to all nearby pods. The lights and sounds coming from the escape pods disoriented the creature. Seizing the opportunity, Andy sprinted out of the escape pod and ran forward without looking back. But it wasn't long before 2 creatures spotted him. Thinking he was as good as dead, Andy tripped and fell onto the sand. To his surprise, the creatures suddenly stopped, roaring as if they were afraid of something. Having narrowly escaped death, Andy didn't waste any time. He quickly got up and continued moving deeper. All around him were strange mounds of earth, and soon a swarm of insects, resembling fireflies, appeared. Andy, in awe of the surreal scene, couldn't help but marvel at the beauty of this dangerous planet. But in the next moment, the harmless-looking fireflies suddenly turned red and attacked Andy with fierce aggression. The entire swarm descended on him, but thanks to his spacesuit, their attacks posed no real threat. But when he finally got rid of the fireflies, he suddenly noticed a set of damaged spacesuits on the ground. His instincts told him danger was near. Sure enough, the next moment, a massive creature emerged from the sand and bit down hard on Andy. It was only then that Andy realized what the creatures had been afraid of. But by then, it was too late. The gargantuan mouth continued to swallow Andy, its immense strength keeping him trapped. Knowing he wouldn't survive, Andy regretfully told Naomi that he couldn't come to save her. As the creature completely swallowed him, Andy's consciousness began to fade. Just then, Leonard detected a sharp decline in Andy's life signs and automatically initiated a defibrillation. The creature, in pain, immediately spat Andy out, unintentionally saving him. With the creature closing in again, Andy had no choice but to hide in a nearby mound of earth. To his surprise, this turned out to be the firefly's nest. But compared to the terrifying monster, the firefly's attacks were insignificant. Andy managed to escape from the other side, but his oxygen was rapidly running out. Fortunately, Naomi wasn't far from his location. Andy hurriedly quickened his pace and ran towards Naomi, finally reaching the outside of her escape pod just as he was about to run out of breath. Seeing him, Naomi quickly opened the pod door and shared her oxygen with Andy. Once the suffocating feeling subsided, Andy successfully helped Naomi escape as well. However, their oxygen wouldn't last much longer, so they had to immediately head toward the site of the crashed spaceship. Just as they stepped out of the escape pod, the air around them was filled with the intense growls of monsters. Countless creatures were already surrounding them. Watching hungrily, they immediately realized the gravity of the situation and began to run desperately toward the wreckage of the spaceship, with the monsters hot on their heels. But the spacesuits they were wearing, along with their connected oxygen tanks, were now a burden. After what felt like an eternity of running, they finally saw the spaceship wreckage, but the monsters were now dangerously close. In their panic, they didn't notice the obstacle in their path. Just as one of the creatures was about to attack, Naomi quickly pulled out a flare gun and fired it, unexpectedly drawing the creature's attention away. Seeing this, Naomi had an idea. She fired another flare. Using this opportunity, Naomi and Andy scrambled to their feet and rushed toward the spaceship. They managed to get inside just in time, slamming the hatch shut before the creatures could catch up. The steel door slammed down, crushing one of the monsters, but the creatures outside seemed undeterred. Furiously pounding on the door, Naomi and Andy quickly made their way inside the ship. Although the entire spacecraft was a wreck, the power system was still operational. However, The next series of events quickly sent Naomi and Andy back into a state of panic. Fresh blood appeared on the floor. Following the trail cautiously, they made their way toward the control room at the end of the hallway, only to find it covered in spider webs. As they realized something was wrong, they saw another monster emerging from the opposite side, causing Naomi and Andy to quickly turn off the lights and hide in a corner. To their horror, the monster had already boarded the ship before them. Luckily, the creature eventually left. However, just as Naomi and Andy were about to find a room to hide, the monster returned. As they were fleeing, Andy pressed a door button, and Naomi tried to stop him, but it was too late. On the other side was an airlock, which could only be opened from the outside, meaning they were trapped here. The only silver lining was that there was oxygen in the ship, so they didn't need to wear their helmets anymore. Watching the creature relentlessly pound the steel door, Naomi and Andy could only hold each other and cry in despair. But then Naomi suddenly noticed something glowing on Andy's back. Andy immediately realized that it was the insect egg he had inadvertently carried out with him from the firefly nest. Perhaps it could help them escape. Just then, the monster tore through the steel door and charged in. At Andy's shout, Naomi quickly grabbed the egg and threw it at the creature. The fireflies inside the egg hatched and began attacking the monster in a frenzy. Naomi and Andy used this distraction to escape. They planned to head to the cargo hold, but soon realized there was a drop between them and the hold below. To make things worse, the fireflies hadn't been enough to stop the monster's pursuit. Seeing this, Andy quickly shut the door, but it was too late. The monster followed them as they fell to the lower level. It quickly got back up and began crawling toward Naomi and Andy, closing in on them. In a desperate moment, Andy threw out liquid adhesive from his suit. The monster bit down on it, its mouth getting stuck, and Naomi and Andy seized the opportunity to flee. But Andy knew this wouldn't be enough. They needed to find a way to kill the creature. Looking up at the high sleep pods, Andy came up with a plan. He told Naomi to distract the monster while he climbed up to the pods to find an opportunity to use one of them to crush the creature. Following Andy's instructions, Naomi began to draw the monster's attention, but with only 2 legs, how could she possibly outrun a 6-legged creature? It wasn't long before she was knocked flying. To cover for Naomi, Andy quickly turned off the lights in the cargo hold, temporarily throwing the creature off her trail. However, with its keen sense of smell, the creature was still able to track Naomi. Fortunately, Naomi managed to scramble into a broken sleep pod just in time before the monster got too close. When the monster failed to find her, it turned and left. But Naomi, who had inadvertently turned her head back, discovered the signal light next to her. The moment Andy got into the sleeping capsule, Naomi turned on all the signal lights and hung them on herself. Then she attracted the monster's attention and sprinted in Andy's direction. Seeing the opportunity Naomi had created by risking her life, Andy didn't hesitate to activate the cryopod, even though he knew there was a risk of falling to his death. Just as the creature was about to reach Naomi, the sleep pod shot out and slammed into the creature with tremendous force. Through their extraordinary intelligence and courage, Naomi and Andy successfully defeated the terrifying alien monster. Although Andy was knocked unconscious from the impact, he soon woke up to Naomi's calls. By then, the sun was rising outside. After the ordeal, Naomi and Andy approached the window and watched as the sun slowly rose over the unknown planet. They suddenly realized that it was also a beautiful planet. They would now survive on the ship's abundant supplies and oxygen, while awaiting the rescue ship that would arrive in 2.5 years.